Every single woman I know has lived this horrifying moment where you're talking to a guy and then he says something totally disrespectful. So you get the courage to speak up and he throws it back at you with, oh, are you on your period or something? It's absolutely demeaning, completely dismissive to us women, and designed to shut us down. So Charles, as the author of Supercommunicators, what can we actually say in that moment to hold our ground and reply with total confidence?
I think there's two situations here. There's one where someone does this unintentionally. I say something that's just insensitive because I don't know better and I'm not thinking. And then there's the second case where I'm trying to be insensitive. I'm trying to bully you. So let's talk about the first one first. In that first case, our instinct often when we stand up is to tell the other person that they're wrong, to try and control them, and to say, you just said this thing and it's ignorant and it shows that you don't know the facts. In that case, what I'm doing is I'm attacking the other person and they feel attacked. But there's an alternative. The alternative is instead of telling you what you've done, is to talk about myself and how I feel. Is to say, when you said that thing, and maybe this wasn't your intention, I just want you to know, it made me feel like you weren't listening to me, or it made me feel small, or it made me feel upset, right? And at that point, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm literally just telling you how I feel. When I do that, I gain all the power, because what I'm doing is I am letting my vulnerability out into the world. And if you disagree, that's fine, but I think it's okay. I'm just talking about myself. That's where that power comes from. Now, if it's that second guy, the jerk, right? Who's like just trying to belittle you or neg you or make you feel bad about yourself. In that case, honestly, the best thing you can do, just walk away. Like, that's not a conversation you need to be in. That is not a person with good intentions. You're not gonna convince them to act differently.
So there's two scenarios, actually, two responses to that. So one scenario is, it's very hard for women to then feel proud of themselves once you've walked away. I tell you what ends up happening. You walk away and then you get home and you remember what they said. And then you remember you didn't stand up for yourself, you just walked away.
Yeah.
That emotion of, I didn't even have my own back. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is you don't have the courage to walk away and you end up emotionally flooded.
Right.
And then you just respond, and now you become a screaming match, and the person that dismissed you by saying, oh, you're on your period, now they're just like, see, I told you're being emotional.
Right. You just proved it. Okay, so let's talk about the first scenario first. That situation where you do walk away and you feel bad afterwards because you feel like you didn't stand up for your sisters, you didn't stand up for yourself, you didn't stand up for history. Here's the thing that I want everyone to hear, which is when you stand up is when you leave. When you stand up is when you say, I'm not gonna create even any space for this in my life. That is you standing up. Because the truth of the matter is, if you say, you are such a jerk, you're such a male misogynist, you're X, you're Y, you're Z, you're so ignorant, you're not gonna change their mind. But you know how you are gonna stand up? Is you're gonna say, I can walk away. I care about you and your opinions so little, I don't even have to tell you why you're wrong. You are insignificant to me, and I can leave. We've been trained since we were young to see saying yes as a form of power, right? To say, if you ask me to go on a date and I say yes, I have some power in that. If you ask me to go to bed with you and I say yes, I have some power in that. But we have just as much power in saying no. And that is a power that we have to grab and we have to be jealously protective of and that we have to use. So in those situations where we don't walk away and we're just at a loss and we just feel completely overwhelmed. So I'm in a moment, you're yelling at me, you're telling me this stuff. I feel like I need to respond, but it is just fine for me to close my eyes and say, give me 10 seconds. I want to think about what I want to say, right? That's taking power. You can't control me to respond to you. I get to decide when I can respond. And I'm gonna take 10 seconds and I'm gonna ask myself, what do I want out of this? What do I want out of this exchange? Do I want you to know that you're making me feel bad? Do I want you to see me as powerful? Do I want just for it to stop and like I don't have to deal with you anymore? Once I know what I want, all of my choices become so much easier. Success isn't convincing this person to stop or convince them something I don't want. It's all about me knowing what I want. and sharing that with the world.
That idea of having a goal when you're in a conversation was one of the biggest pivotal moments, I think, for myself in communicating.
Yeah.
Because I would go in with pure emotion and I thought that saying how I felt was the goal. And then when every time I left the conversation, I didn't feel better.
Yeah.
And I started to realize that wasn't the goal. The goal was to either walk away with my head held high, to be proud of myself for having the hard conversation. Like, the goal was so important. So I've got a couple of scenarios. So if you can help us navigate what to do and then potentially what to say back,
absolutely,
that would be great. Okay. All right, so I'd actually like to talk to you about emotional conflicts. And one of the things us women definitely hear a lot is when we get asked inappropriate questions. For instance, why don't you smile more? Which, let's face it, is a control disguised as a compliment.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is, right? So oftentimes when we're feeling insecure, and there's lots of men who feel insecure, what our instinct to make ourselves feel better is to control something. And it might seem like the easiest thing to control is the person sitting across from me, right? And this happens in marriages too, right? That we start arguing with each other and like, I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm trying to control your emotions. I'm trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't feel. When we encounter that, that is toxic. And we should recognize it as toxic. If someone comes up and they say to you, you're so pretty, why don't you smile more? Recognize immediately they are trying to control you, and that is toxic. And the way that we respond to that is we reassert our own control with ourselves. I don't need to control that other person, right? I can say, I smile when I'm happy, and I don't need anyone's permission to do it. I am reasserting my own control, right? Now, the other thing is that we can try and find, let's say that somebody said that to me and they're not trying to be mean. Like the truth, so I've been married to my wife for 22 years. It's a wonderful marriage. I love my wife. But the truth of the matter is I say dumb things all the time. And I don't mean to say something that offends her. I don't mean to be insensitive. And yet sometimes my lips move faster than my brain does and the wrong thing comes out. And in those moments, my intent is not bad. My skills are not up to par. And so she should respond differently. Oftentimes in a marriage, and you know this and I know this, the most toxic thing is when we're trying to control the other person. But we have this instinct for control. How do we deal with that? The answer is to find things we can control together. So if you said to me, why don't you smile more? Like, I'm worried about you. You're so pretty and you're not smiling. If I say, I understand you're trying to help me. Let me tell you how that makes me feel. What I'm doing at that moment is I'm showing you that I'm listening to you, and I'm speaking in a way that I want you to understand me. And now suddenly we're controlling something together. We're controlling this conversation together. Instead of me trying to control you, you trying to control me, now we're on the same side of the table and we're saying, oh no, the goal of this conversation is for you to figure out what's making you unhappy. And it turns out I just made you unhappy, right? I'm part of the problem, but that's okay because we are finding solutions together. We are partners and teammates in finding a solution. That's really powerful.
I love that so much. Okay, I've got a few more.
Okay.
So we've got minimizing feelings. An example is, it's not a big deal. That actually is a covert control tactic to invalidate perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time, right? And again, we do it unintentionally, right? I'm trying to cheer you up and I say, oh, you shouldn't be worried about that. Like, it's not such a big deal. It's gonna be fine. I think I'm making you feel better. That's my goal. But what I'm actually doing is I'm saying, what you're feeling right now, it's not legitimate. You shouldn't feel that thing. Mm-hmm. In those moments, the thing that we can do to stand up for ourselves is to say, thank you for giving me your perspective on that. Let me give you my perspective on it, which is that I am worried about this, and I think that I'm worried for valid reasons. And what would be most helpful to me right now is if you listened to those reasons and you saw them the way that I'm seeing them. Instead of telling me that I'm wrong, I want to help you see them the same way that I do. Now, what's really nice about that is that most people want to be helpful, right? The whole reason I said, oh, you shouldn't be worried about that is because I wanted to help you. And this is actually what's known as meta-conversation, right? When we're having a conversation about our conversation, about how we should communicate with each other. And I say to you, I know that you're trying to help me. Let me tell you what I need right now. I need you to hear that I'm worried and to not dismiss those worries, right? At that point, I'm telling you, this is what I need from this conversation. Now we're aligned. Now, part of it though, is that you have to know what you do need, right? You have to take a couple of seconds and say, What do I want out of this conversation? Why am I sharing this? Why am I telling my husband that I'm worried about this? Why am I telling my boyfriend that I'm worried about this? What do I want from them? Because then I can tell them what I want and need.
Oh, that actually reminds me of your 3 H's.
Yeah, so this is something that they teach teachers to do. When a student comes up and they want to have a conversation, one of the first things that a teacher will do is say to them, do you want to be helped? Do you want to be hugged? Or do you want to be heard? Right? Oftentimes I have a conversation with my wife. I come home and I complain about work, and she'll say something like, do you want me to help you solve this, or do you just need to vent? Right? She's asking me like, do you want to be helped, or do you want to be heard? And I'd say like, no, I just need to be vent. I just need to vent, right? And sometimes she'll throw the hug in there. Yeah. When we ask people what they want, our conversations get better. And when we know what we want, our conversations become more powerful.
All right, guys, we'll be right back with Charles. But for 1 second, are you struggling to build your confidence, to set boundaries and stand up for yourself? Are you struggling to feel like you have a freaking voice? Then smash the subscribe button down there so you can get notified every single time another episode comes out. My homie, you are not alone, and we're here to build our confidence together. So smash the subscribe button to get notifications. Now, back to the episode. That's so good. And it's the what we want that really hit me, because so often you don't actually know what you want. You have a feeling, I want to feel a certain way, but then what acts have to be true in order for you to feel that certain way?
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's just a couple of seconds. It's just a matter of sitting there and thinking to yourself, how do I want this conversation to go? What is one thing that I really want to say in that conversation? What is one thing that I hope the other person says? And once I'm aware of that, now I know how to direct the conversation. Now I know how to take control of that conversation rather than just reacting. I'm proacting.
Yeah. Since I heard you say this, by the way, with the 3 H's, I put them on Post-it notes and I put them in my kitchen. And the reason why I did it is a lot of my conversations with my husband happens in the kitchen. I'm cooking, he walks in, I'm upset, he's like, what's wrong? And so I put them right behind me where I cook. In order for me to remind myself, I need to know what to ask for when my husband walks in the room. Yeah. And then also, if I accidentally don't do it or forget it, he walks in the room and he sees them, so he can ask me.
Yeah, and what I love about that, and this happens in good relationships, this is a hallmark of good relationships, is that you've come up with a little package, 3 Post-it notes, that represent a whole conversation and a whole system of giving you what you need and you communicating what you need. That's wonderful. That's so wonderful to hear.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I've got a few more scenarios for you. Okay. So sometimes one of the hardest things actually for me, I don't know about most women, is sarcasm. As an example, well, someone's sensitive today. That is actually meant to shame you for reacting to hurtful behavior by flipping the blame.
Yeah. So there's a woman at Google. I wrote a chapter about how Google creates psychological safety, because this was a real priority for them. How do we create psychological safety on teens? And she told me that she was in a meeting and someone made a sarcastic comment, but it kind of was a slight of her. And she turned to them and she said, way to destroy the psychological safety in this meeting. And the guy all of a sudden said, oh, I'm so sorry, right? And they were friends. They were friends, so they could kind of do this back and forth. But I think this is where, when someone says something to you and you're wondering, is it sarcastic or are they trying to take me down a notch? I think at that moment, ask and say, do you actually believe that? Like, do you actually think that, like, what you just said, is that true, or are you being sarcastic? Because you're doing 2 things. First of all, you're clarifying for yourself and everyone else what's actually going on, right? Do they mean it, or are they being sarcastic? Second of all, you're sending them a message. Your sarcasm is not very good sarcasm because I can't recognize it. Like, either you got to stop doing it or you got to get much better at it.
Okay, but what if someone pushes back and is like, what do you mean? That wasn't, you're being very sensitive today, because clearly you took what I said as this sarcastic thing and I really meant it genuinely. Like, there is that part of like that manipulation that then points the finger back at you. It's like, see again, you are being too sensitive.
And at that point, I think you say, thank you for sharing that with me. I just want to let you know how this made me feel. Like, your goal might not have been to make me feel small, but I feel small as a result of what you said. And when I admit that vulnerability, I'm actually taking power. Because now that person sitting at that table, they have to either say, yes, I want you to feel small, or they have to say, I'm sorry that I made you feel small. This was my fault. And neither of those look great for them, right? This is the jujitsu. To call things as they are is to force someone to defend their actions if their actions are indefensible or apologize for them.
It's so good. Okay, I will now want to move on to, there's something you talk in your book about how people argue differently.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the difference between couples that are happy and argue and couples that are unhappy and argue.
Yeah, everyone argues, right? Every couple argues. It's a natural part of a marriage or relationship or even a work relationship. Everyone argues. The question is, how do you argue? When I argue with you, is it my instinct that I'm gonna try and control you and you try and control me? That's toxic.
What would that look like?
So it would be me saying, okay, the reason we're having this problem is because you always spend too much. I've tried to set up the credit cards and you spend too much, and I see you getting ready to attack me. I'm not even gonna hear it. I don't wanna have this conversation. And you're starting to cry, like, you shouldn't be upset about this. This isn't something to get upset about. Why are you crying? All of those is me trying to control you. That is toxic. And oftentimes your response is gonna be to try and control me back, right? You're such a jerk. You bring this up at night when you know that I've had a long day. When I cry, you just make fun of me for crying. You shouldn't do that. That's a terrible, terrible thing to do. Okay, so what's a better way of having an argument? A better way of having an argument is for you and me to find things that we can control together instead of trying to control each other. So, okay, we start fighting about where we're gonna go for Thanksgiving. And then the fact that you don't like my mother comes up, that we don't have enough money to avoid the trip. So instead what I'm gonna say is, let's control this together. I'm gonna say, look, let's just focus on Thanksgiving. Like, we can talk about moms and we can talk about money some other time, but like right now, is it okay for us to just focus on the question of Thanksgiving? We're controlling the boundaries of the conversation together. Or let's say I wanna control the environment. We start fighting at midnight and we're both tired, we've had a long day. Together we can say, okay, look, let's just put this on ice. Let's talk about this at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning after we've both gotten a good night's sleep and we're up and the sun's up. Now we're controlling the environment together. And then finally, there's self-control, right? Instead of trying to control you, I'm gonna take a beat and I'm gonna say, look, give me 10 seconds. I just wanna sort of collect myself. And I'm gonna think to myself, I don't need to react emotionally. I don't need to attack back. The best thing I can do is to just tell this person how I'm feeling in the clearest way possible. Now I'm controlling myself, and it doesn't feel like an attack to you if I'm controlling myself. And maybe you should walk away. Like, there are conversations. No one ever has to have a conversation they don't want to have. No one is obligated to have any conversation that they don't enjoy, that feels dangerous, that feels threatening. So maybe you want to walk away. But if I'm in a conversation, if I want to have a conversation with you, those walls, they make it harder for us to understand each other. The key to conversations is vulnerability. And sometimes we misunderstand what vulnerability is. Vulnerability has a very specific definition in psychology and neuroscience. Vulnerability is when I tell you something you could judge. Oh. Right? If I tell you, I think Star Trek is better than Star Wars, you could definitely judge that, right? But I don't care what your judgment is. Right. And yet, by telling you that, it creates a neural cascade in my brain that makes me feel vulnerable. And if in that moment you withhold judgment, instead of judging me, you say, oh, that's interesting. And then you share something about yourself that I could judge. You say, actually, I like Back to the Future better than Howard the Duck. Then at that moment, we feel closer to each other. Now, if I'm creating walls, if I'm on the defense, then what I'm doing is I'm not allowing that vulnerability to flow between us. And the thing is that vulnerability is a strength. If I am vulnerable in a conversation, I'm the strongest person in that conversation, because what I'm saying is, you can't hurt me. I'm willing to tell you who I am. I'm willing to tell you what you could judge, because even if you judge me, it doesn't matter as much as my judgment of myself.
Just a lot of us women, though, actually feel the opposite. It's that we share something that's extremely vulnerable and we are extremely worried and insecure that someone may use it as a weapon.
Yeah. The truth of the matter is, vulnerability can only be used against you as a weapon if you let it. There is study after study showing that when you are vulnerable, people see you as more high status. They see you as more powerful. They see you as more confident. They see you as more self-assured. You're more persuasive, right? And we've all experienced this, right? You walk into a meeting and it's the person who says the unexpected thing, who says, I gotta be honest with you, like, I was really worried about this meeting, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I've come up with this idea, and I think it's gonna help us. That person has more power than the one who comes in and says, I've got the best idea ever, I'm ready to go, right? Vulnerability is power. Showing vulnerability is power. And just because you show vulnerability does not mean that if someone else wants to weaponize it, that you have to play into that. You can say, I shared this thing with you, not so that you use it to attack me, but so that you use it to understand me. And now I'm curious why you're using it to attack me. What is your intent here? Now I'm in control of that conversation. I'm in control of that exchange.
Oh, I love how you flipped that. That was so good. That's so good. Okay, another thing that you talk about in your book is looping for understanding.
Yeah. So one of the things that we know about supercommunicators is that they tend to ask more questions than the average person, like 10 to 20 times more questions than the average person. But some of those questions are very special. Some of those questions invite others to talk about their values or their beliefs or their experiences. These are known as deep questions. And at that moment, what's really important is that we prove that we're listening. Because we tend to think of listening as a passive activity. I close my mouth and I open my ears. That's the first step to listening, but that is not listening all on its own. Because if you and I are having a heated conversation, if we're talking about something important, even if we're talking about something that's just meaningful, there's always going to be a little suspicion in the back of our head. Is this person actually listening to me, or are they just waiting their turn to speak? So how do we overcome that suspicion? We prove that we're listening by doing looping for understanding. The first thing is, I'm gonna ask you a question, preferably a deep question. I'm gonna ask you something like, oh, that's interesting that you and your husband, have been married for so long. What's that like? What has made your marriage go well? You're gonna answer the question. Step 2, I'm gonna repeat back what I heard you say in my own words. Oh, what I heard you say, so it sounds like something that's really important to you is that you and your husband both support each other in your careers because you're both really focused on your careers. That's step 1, step 2, right? Step 3 is the step that I often forget, which is, then I'm gonna ask if I got it right. Did I hear you correctly? Am I understanding how your relationship works correctly? Because at that moment, what I'm actually doing is I'm asking you for permission to acknowledge that I was listening. And once you acknowledge that I'm listening to you, you become more likely to listen to me in return. So looping for understanding, ask a question. After they've answered it, repeat back in your own words what you heard them say, prove that you were paying attention. And then step number 3, ask if you got it right. Sometimes we're in a conversation and we're arguing with the person in our head, right? We're not actually listening because we're thinking like, you're wrong, or what about X? We're not in the conversation, we're in our own head. But if my job is to pay close enough attention to what you're saying that I can repeat it back to you, then I'm not in my head. I have to be paying attention to you. I have to be listening closely. It becomes automatic that I'm in the moment. I'm present in that conversation. And that's where power comes from. So in fact, you want to role play?
Yeah, please, let's go.
Okay, so tell me the hardest fight you've had with your husband.
The hardest fight I had with him was getting him to understand and realize that my hormones being in perimenopause has changed. Therefore, I am not the same human that he communicated with a year before.
Oh, that's really interesting. And as my wife is going through menopause, so here's what I heard you say. What I heard you say is that communication, it was an important part of your relationship with your husband, that communication changed, and that you recognized communication had changed, but maybe he didn't recognize that communication had changed. And that getting him to recognize that was important because that helps you be heard. Did I get that right?
Seen, yes.
Yeah. So what's important there is that I basically repeated back what you said, but I put it in my own words, the way that I made sense of it.
Oh my God.
You want to try it in reverse? You want to be the okay, so you can ask me a question
All
if you want.
What moment did you feel like you were metaphorically to your knees and you weren't sure if you could get back up?
That's a good one.
Coming up.
When you're having a discussion, you think you know what that discussion is about. But actually, every discussion is made up of multiple kinds of conversations.
All right, real talk. One of the hardest things I've had to face was when I was in the shower washing my hair and all of a sudden I found a clump of hair in my hands. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? And it completely dented my self-esteem and my confidence. And so that's why you've got to go and check out OneSkin's new OS1 Hair Scalp Serum. Guys, these are the same amazing female scientists that gave us their skin transformation OS1 peptide. And now they're coming for our scalps. And just like the rest of our body, yes, our scalps age too. So this serum actually targets aging cells all at the root, literally, to help you grow fuller, denser, healthier hair. And it's not just fluff, it's backed by science. So go grab your bottle of OS1 hair at oneskin.co and use my code LISA for 15% off. That's code LISA at oneskin.co. Your future self and your future hair will thank you. Now, back to the show.
So when I first became a reporter, I got an internship at the Washington Post, and most interns got hired, and I did not get hired. And I was like, maybe like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. Like, is this a career that's gonna work for me?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you had a dream of what your life would look like. You built your identity on that dream, and you faced a moment where you weren't sure whether your identity was an accurate reflection of what your life was going to be.
Yeah. And then ask me if you got it.
Oh yeah, did I get that right?
You got it exactly right.
Yeah.
And you're right, I feel so seen, right?
Funny
It feels amazing. It feels amazing to have someone tell you like, here's what I just heard you say.
Yeah.
Because you gave it more profundity. You gave it more depth than even I did, right? And to have someone care about you enough that they take what you've said and they give it even more profundity, more thought, more depth, that feels amazing.
That was so good. Thank you so much for breaking it down. All right, so I'd love to move on now. So you talk about there are 3 types of conversations.
So this actually started for me when I would get into this bad pattern with my wife, where I'd come home from work and I'd start complaining about my day, and she would offer me some really good advice. She'd say like, why don't you take your like coworkers out to lunch and you guys can get to know each other a little bit better. And instead of being able to hear her good advice, I would get even more upset, right? Why aren't you supporting me? You're supposed to be outraged on my behalf. This is probably a little familiar. Yeah, yes. This happens in every relationship. So
outraged on my behalf. That's
yes,
so on
yeah,
point.
that's exactly. Like you should tell me that I'm right.
Yeah.
So I went to these researchers and I asked them, what's going on here? And they said, well, we're living through this age of understanding communication like never before. And one of the things we've discovered is that when you're having a discussion, you think you know what that discussion is about. But actually, every discussion is made up of multiple kinds of conversations. And in general, these conversations fall into one of 3 buckets. There are practical conversations where we're making plans or we're solving problems. But then there's emotional conversations where I tell you what I'm feeling, and I don't want you to solve my feelings, I want you to empathize. And then there's social conversations, which is about how we relate to each other, how we relate to society, the identities that are important to us. And they said, what we've discovered is all 3 of these conversations are important. In a discussion, you'll probably have all 3 conversations. But if I'm having an emotional conversation and you're having a practical conversation, we will not hear each other. We will not feel connected. And that's, of course, what was happening. I was coming home from work and having an emotional conversation. My wife responded with a practical conversation. It was like 2 ships passing in the night. So what we have to do is we have to take a step back and say, what kind of conversation is this person trying to have? And then we can match them, or we can invite them to match us. And that's where we suddenly get in sync and we become aligned and the conversation just unfolds.
Okay, I absolutely love this. I geek out over this stuff, by the way. And so I wrote down a couple of things from each of the types of conversations. I really want to start with emotional, though. I'm sorry, it's just the thing that...
It's the most important one.
It's the one that I find the hardest, that I have tried to work on so much because I bring emotion to everything. And so I just found it extremely fascinating. So I'd love to break down a couple of things that I heard you talk about. I'd love to go a little deeper in. So you say that when you first meet someone, if you come in with an emotion, it basically will dictate what you say, what you hear, what you think, and how you react.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is that everyone comes into a conversation with an emotion.
Right.
It's just a question of whether I have acknowledged it to myself, right? If I'm talking to you about something completely practical, we're going to send the kids to camp. Where should they go to camp next year? There are these emotions that I'm feeling. I'm feeling like worried that I'm going to send them to the wrong camp. Can we afford it? I'm feeling pride that like we care about our kids enough that we're going to send them to camp. Those emotions are all in my head, and they are influencing how I speak and how I hear. And so the best thing for me to do is to be aware of them, because then I'm in control. I have the power to choose which emotion I'm going to give free rein to and which ones I'm going to say, we can set that aside for right now.
That's so powerful because also, let's say you say that to your wife and you've got the concern, like you said, like, I don't want to send them to the wrong one. I'm really worried about money, but you don't say that. You just ask your wife, where are we going to send them? Now you're carrying so much emotion that she may not realize that one thing she could say could trigger you
Absolutely.
to then have a heightened emotion that she's like, I don't understand what just happened.
So here's what we do next. When that conversation starts, I'm going to ask a deep question. As the person who's the receiver, I'm going to ask a deep question. And a deep question is something that asks about my values, my beliefs, or my experiences. And that can sound intimidating, but it's as simple as, in the camp example, saying, what's important to you about camp? Why do you think we should send the kids to camp? Like, what's important about that? Well, at that moment, I'm going to start talking about my values, right? I really value our kids getting outdoors. Or I'm going to start talking about my beliefs. I went to camp and it was such a meaningful experience for me that I believe camp teaches you things that you need to know about yourself. Or I'm going to talk about my experiences. When I was at camp, I made some of my best friends that I've ever had, and I want my kids to have that. Just this one simple question. Why are you asking this? What's important about this to you? It allows me to tell you what kind of mindset I'm in. Is this an emotional question for me? Is it a practical question? Is it a social question? And once you know, then you can say, let me meet you there. Or you can say, I hear what you're saying about this being something that you're really proud about, and it sounds like there's a lot of emotions around this. Before we talk about that, is it okay if we talk about the practicalities? Because we're supposed to go on vacation this summer, right? At that moment, what I'm doing is I'm asking you, do I have your permission to move from an emotional conversation to a practical conversation? And then we're moving together.
That's so good. I'm going to steal this tactic now. So genius. But what I used to do is if my husband responded or someone responded in a very odd way that I didn't expect, sometimes it catches you off guard because what you were saying earlier is you're just talking about camp. They're talking about their childhood and everything that camp means to them.
That's exactly right.
And you don't realize. So the game I used to like to play was called, if this was a script, what would have to be true about the character?
Oh, interesting.
So for the character to, let's say, have a very heightened emotional response over going to camp, I would have to step back. That may seem weird. I would ask myself, if I was writing the script and I had to write the character, okay, the fact that maybe they have triggers about camp, that's why they would act like that. Okay, well, what would the triggers look like? And so I kind of work backwards, but yours is genius. Just knowing the categories and then being able to articulate to somebody to figure out what type of conversation they're in.
And just to ask. I love your technique of trying to come up with a backstory for this person. Try to understand them as they understand themselves. And sometimes we can do that. And sometimes the easiest thing to do is just to ask. Just to say this seems like a big thing for you. Help me understand why. What is going on? Tell me your backstory.
Yeah.
And in psychology, this is known as perspective getting. So when I try and put myself in your shoes and I try and see the world through your eyes, that's known as perspective taking. And it turns out we're pretty bad at it.
Why?
But it's just very natural. If I told you to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is starving in some other country, you can try, but you don't. But if on the other hand, I engage in perspective getting, I ask you, I'm just wondering, this seems like a big deal to you, to help me understand why. I'm giving you the opportunity to educate me, and I don't need to see the world through your eyes. You're going to tell me how to see the world through your eyes.
That's so good. And then I just want to emphasize the one thing you said earlier is the matching of heightened emotions. It does feel so important, almost especially in relationships.
Yeah.
If I'm really upset about something and my husband, he doesn't care less, I don't feel connected to him.
No.
But if I'm really pissed and he's like, I know, babe, didn't that suck? That's all he has to say. And I feel great.
Absolutely. And sometimes if you're really, really angry and he responds with anger back, that might not help, right?
Oh, yeah.
But simply acknowledging, babe, you seem really upset about this. I understand that this is something that you really care about. Just acknowledging your heightened emotion validates it. And that's all that we often need in order to feel connected.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, I wanted to talk about non-linguistic emotional expressions.
Yeah. So a lot of our communication is not the words that come out of our mouths, but everything around them, right? My tone of voice, my expressions when I'm speaking to you, what I do with my body, right? The difference between me sitting and going like this versus me going like this is obvious, right? If we remind ourselves to look for it. So very often what happens is that when we're in a conversation, it's so easy to pay attention to someone's words that we just pay attention to their words and we ignore everything else. But if we just take a second and we say like, okay, just like, I hear what Lisa's saying, I'm just gonna pay attention. How is she sitting? Like, does it seem like she's comfortable or does it seem like she's anxious? What is she sending me with her expressions? She's smiling at me or she's frowning. If we just remind ourselves, we get so much more information, so much more communication in that exchange.
Yeah, I love that. And you also talk about, so there are two things. So you've got mood. Is there mood positive and negative? And
Right.
then energy. Is it high or low energy?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So what would a negative high energy person look like?
Oh, angry, right? Anger is negative high energy. Think about the difference between someone who's angry and someone who's disappointed. So someone who's angry is negative high energy. I'm shouting, I'm telling you what you did wrong. Someone who's disappointed is negative low energy. I'm just kind of disappointed that this didn't come together.
Which sometimes that's worse.
Oh, it's often worse, right? It often is.
Yes.
But what's important is that once you have this matrix in your mind, once you're saying like, what's their energy level? Is it high or low? What's their mood? Is it positive or negative? Now I know exactly what you're feeling. I can basically read your emotions so much better because is Lisa angry or is she disappointed? Just pay attention to the energy. They're both negative, but what's the energy telling me?
I love this, like knowing how someone's going to communicate. Okay, they obviously seem negative, they're very high energy, therefore they'll probably be yelling and arguing. Does that then give you a cue of how to handle that person? Like, why is that important?
Absolutely, because at that moment, if you want them to feel listened to, you need to acknowledge what they are feeling and you need to acknowledge it accurately. If you're really angry and I say, you seem really disappointed, you're gonna say, no, I'm not disappointed, I am pissed. But if I come to you and you seem really angry and I say, I see that you're really angry right now and I wanna take that seriously because this is clearly something that's important to you. Let's talk about like, I wanna get into it. Like, let's get into like what's going on and how it can get better. At that moment, what I'm saying to you is, I'm listening to you. I hear your anger. I validate and acknowledge your anger. That doesn't mean that I agree with it. It doesn't mean that I have to give up my own perspectives. But now you know that I'm listening to you and we can work together.
And that helps you guys connect more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It feels wonderful to have someone listen to you.
Because often in that situation, by the way, I think people just try to dismiss it. Like, to calm someone down is to somewhat dismiss their response.
Oh, absolutely. If I come in negative high energy, I'm really hot, I'm like coming in hard, and you say, let's just take some deep breaths. Let's just calm down. If you're not matching my energy and my affect, what you're basically saying is like, you're a crazy person and like you should feel like a jerk, right?
Yeah.
I need to show you that I'm listening to you instead of trying to invalidate what you're feeling, that I hear what you're feeling.
So what if someone just pushes back? Because like me and you right now, I feel like we're communicating so well, right? Like we're seeing each other, we're bouncing off each other. There are some people though that really don't want to communicate. They just want to tell you what to do. And a lot of my community have been in relationships where they're working on themselves, they're working on the skill sets, they're working on boundaries, how to communicate. But if you're in a toxic relationship, as you start to do these communication things, what they end up doing is try to tear them down.
And the truth of the matter is, it takes two people to have a conversation. Yeah. And if one person says, no, I'm the one who talks and you're the one who listens, that's not a conversation, right? That's a dictatorship. And if they're unwilling to change who they are, if they're unwilling to be someone who wants to have a conversation where I speak and you listen and you speak and I listen, where it's a give and take and a back and forth, if they're unwilling to do that, then that's probably not a relationship you should be in. But the best part about this is that oftentimes when we're in that relationship, we wonder, I don't know that this is toxic. Maybe he's just bad at listening and like he is listening to me, but he doesn't know how to show it. He's really bad at discussing his emotions. Once I have these skills in my pocket, then I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm communicating the right way. And if you're not responding, if you're not giving back, then it's not my fault. It's your fault. And this isn't the right relationship for me.
Oh, thank you. I really want to echo that on this channel. So I really appreciate you saying that because I think that is a dynamic that can be problematic because I want us women to really have the skill sets in order to navigate our life. As we build the skill sets, we're going to find people or obstacles that are going to try and stop us. And so in that scenario, just assessing, you get better at your communication, see if they're willing to accept it and greet it, and if not, then that's a sign that you should walk away.
Absolutely, and now it's an objective sign, because what happens is that we second guess ourselves, right? Maybe I'm not being objective, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe he's right and I'm reading too much into this. Now we have an objective standard to say, oh no, I asked him 4 questions and he never asked me a question back. Okay, now I know at that point, what I need to do is I need to either say, do you have any questions for me? And if they say, no, no questions for you, now I know something about what you're looking for from this relationship.
Great dating tip as well.
Yeah, well, so it turns out one of the questions I get most often is, what do I do when I'm at a party or on a date and I'm just asking them questions and they're not asking me any questions back? Because our instinct is to be like, this person is a dud, right? Like this person isn't interested in me. But what I've found is that after asking a couple questions, if I go, I've been asking you so many questions. You probably have some questions for me. Let me give you a chance to ask them. What I find is that people actually have tons of questions that they want to ask me. The problem is they're bad. They're not in the habit of asking questions. They're sort of socially uncomfortable. And so when I give them an opportunity to do so, they become the person I wish that they were. I hope that they were. But sometimes we have to invite people.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, I would like to go on to, so you talk about laughter.
Yeah.
This was insane. So I just want to read something that you put in your book. A study published in 2016 where participants listened for 1 second to recordings and could accurately tell the difference between friends laughing together and strangers trying to laugh alike.
Yeah. What's also interesting is that there was another study that looked at when people laugh. 80% of the time when you and I laugh, it is not in response to anything funny. I'm not laughing at a joke.
I was about to laugh and I was like, oh God, it's
exactly. I didn't tell a joke. And so what happens when we laugh? Yeah. When we laugh, what we're doing is we're signaling to the other person, I want to connect with you. And when they laugh back, the most natural response, they're signaling, I want to connect back. Laughter is this incredibly important part of how we communicate. And it doesn't have to be tied to humor, because most of the time it isn't.
So why knowing that is it important, and how do we use that in an effort to communicate with someone?
So I think there's 2 things that we can carry away from that. Number 1 is we can say, I can laugh. It's okay to laugh. Even if someone says something that doesn't seem like a joke, I can laugh because they're going to see that as me wanting to connect with them. And number 2 is to say, when someone laughs, I should laugh back. It feels very natural and automatic to do so. I should give in to that, because what I'm saying is I want to connect back with you.
Okay, I would love now to go on to actually the practical type of conversation.
Okay.
What is this really about?
So when I get into a conversation, there's sort of 2 questions that should be in my head. What is your goal in this conversation, and what is my goal in this conversation? Now, it's kind of awkward to start each conversation by saying, what's your goal in this conversation? Because you might not know. It's kind of an aggressive way to start a conversation. When I'm just talking to my friends on the phone, like that's not something that comes up. But at the beginning of a conversation, what we're often doing is we're trying to figure out what each person wants. Why are we having this conversation? What's the goal here? And it's a little bit of a negotiation. It's what's known as a soft negotiation or a quiet negotiation, where my goal is not to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. My goal is for us to work together to figure out what this conversation ought to be. So in a practical conversation, if I come to my wife and I say, look, I want to talk about our vacation. And she says, okay, do you want to figure out where we should go or how much we should spend? What she's really asking me is, what kind of conversation do you want to have? What is your goal in this conversation? And it's often very helpful in a practical conversation to find a way to ask that.
Okay, and then now I'd like to talk about the social type of conversation.
Yeah.
And that is, who are we?
Who are we? So in a social conversation, we're talking about the identities that are important to us and how we relate to other people. So in a practical conversation, what I'm looking for is a solution. In an emotional conversation, what I'm looking for is empathy. In a social conversation, what I'm looking for is acknowledgement. So if I'm talking to someone and they say, look, as a Black woman, here's how I see this issue. I don't need to empathize with them. I don't need to say, oh, I feel what you're saying, because I can't. I'm not a Black woman,
yeah.
right? And I can't say, oh, I shouldn't solve it for them and say, oh, the way you feel that way, but here's some solutions to stop you from feeling that way. All I need to do is acknowledge and to say, okay, what I hear you saying is that you've had life experiences that are different from my life experiences, and that gives you a different perspective on this. And that totally makes sense to me. That is completely legitimate. When I acknowledge someone's identity, what I'm doing is I'm saying, you belong in this conversation, you belong in this room, you deserve to be seen. And that's a gift that I can give someone in that social conversation.
How would that echo in a relationship?
Well, okay, so let me ask you. You're a woman, and you're a businesswoman and a business person, and you're an influencer and you're a content creator. Given all those hats that you wear, how does it make you think about your relationship with your husband differently?
It just emphasizes that even when I have all these important things in my life, my husband is still my number one. And when I was a stay-at-home wife and he was my only one thing in my life, he was my number one. But having all these amazing other joys and him still being my number one makes me realize the depth of our connection.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you understand that people could look at you and say, oh, she's just someone who supports her husband. But actually, this is a choice that you've made. You have so many opportunities. You went out and you found these opportunities. You created a whole life for yourself. And you rediscovered that your husband is that anchor. He is at the core of that, and that gives you pleasure. That makes you feel good about yourself and the world and your marriage. Is that right?
Oh, you're so good. Yes, that's right.
But what I've done is I didn't tell you I agreed with you. I mean, I could very well say like that's not the life I want, which is not a bad life. I'm not saying that.
It's fine.
But I didn't have to agree with you. All I had to do was acknowledge that what you are telling me, that I heard it and that it's legitimate. And at that point, it feels like we're having a real conversation.
What kinds of questions then can you ask somebody in order for them to reveal that? Coming up.
The hardest kind of conversation in a relationship is oftentimes about how you see me incorrectly, in my opinion.
If you're a content creator, then you already know the hustle. You pour your soul into every single interview, every video, and then you blink and realize you've spent hours, literally hours, just trying to clip something for social. Like, seriously, it takes longer to edit than it does to actually hit the record button. But here's the thing, we can't not post on social, right? Staying visible, staying relevant, growing your brand, it all rides on getting those clips out there. That's why you've got to go and check out Opus Clip. It's your new secret weapon, my homie. Their Clip Anything feature is a game changer, turning your long form videos into short, scroll stopping content automatically. It's more content, less stress, and zero burnout. So if you're freaking tired of drowning in edits, trust me, you need to go and try Clip Anything by Opus Clip. It's super easy to use and you can try it totally free for the next few weeks when you click the link in the show notes. So don't sleep on this, my homie. Go and get it right now by clicking the link.
So every deep question at its core is, tell me what you make of this, right? So here's an example. Where did you grow up? What part of town did you grow up in?
North London.
North London. So how did that shape you? Like how are you a different person growing up in North London than say growing up in South London?
Ooh, South London is gonna hate me now because I'm gonna say North London is perceived to be more educated than South London. There is a little more wealth, so that probably is the echo of the education. But if you're from central London, North London is very much frowned upon because you're a bit of the ghetto.
Okay. Oh, interesting. That's really interesting.
North London compared to South London, you feel kind of good. North London compared to central London, you feel like crap.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So you've told me a lot about your childhood, right? Like from that, I can infer a lot of like what it was like to grow up. That like going to South London was a different experience than going to central London. Now, what's interesting about that conversation is if you think about the question I asked, what I really asked is, why does this matter? What is it about this that matters to you? Now, you could have answered it in any number of ways. You could have said, oh, actually, North London and South London are very similar. Like, I don't think I would have been a different person if I'd grown up in South London.
Oh, what's interesting is because the way you framed the question, it forced me to think of the differences.
Right, which is great. But you also could have said, oh, North London has better food than South London. So I'm really a foodie now, and I'm really into food. You could have said, oh, I had such a big family in North London, and if we were in South London, we all would have been like spread out all over the place. But in North London, we were able to get this one building all together. Now I know that family was a really important part of your upbringing. I just asked you basically, tell me what's important about this to you, and you told me something about who you are.
Oh my God, that's genius. It really revealed the thing that I cared about when I was younger was being accepted and feeling like valuable. And so thinking about, I felt kind of good that I came from North London when I saw South Londoners, but then I felt shitty about myself when I saw these people from Central London. It goes to show how much of a childhood that I had where I was so worried about being judged because I was bullied.
So if I was to, if we were diagnosing each other, what I would say is,
you're a great therapist.
You because of your childhood, you're status conscious, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you like being status conscious. That doesn't mean that you endorse it, but it's something that's in your head that you can't get away from completely without working at it.
Wow.
Right? Because that means that when we're having a conversation about your life in LA, one of the things I'm gonna wonder is like, did you move to LA to leave that behind? Like, is getting away from status consciousness, does that feel like freedom to you?
No, it felt like I had the dream when I was a child that one day I'm gonna live in LA and be in Hollywood. And everybody told me I was crazy, I was nuts, I didn't have the capacity, the looks, the brains to do it.
So for you, this city, living in this city, is a daily victory. Ooh. There's lots of people who live in LA and they're like, yeah, I just live in LA because my parents are here. Or, I hate LA, I wanna move out, I wanna move to Santa Cruz, California, right? But for you, if I was to say like, oh, isn't LA the worst, the traffic's terrible, that's the wrong thing to say to you. Because for you, LA is a daily victory. The fact that you wake up in this city is proving to yourself how powerful you are.
So as I think about the power of these types of conversations and these types of questions, is it to really, so let's assume dating scenario, for instance. Is it a way of like assessing who they are, what they care about, what their values are, and if this makes for a good potential second date?
Yes, but I like to think of it instead of assessing, it's inviting.
That's better.
I am inviting you to tell me who you are. Because at the end of the day, there are some people I go on first dates with, and they're pleasant people. They're great people. It's just not the right match, right? We don't have the same values. We don't have the same goals. And then there's other people I go on a date with, and the conversation might not be great, but I learned something about you that makes me want to have that second date, that makes me want to get deeper. Because maybe we were both tired, or just I asked the wrong questions and you asked the wrong questions. We went to the wrong restaurant. So I want to invite you to share with me who you actually are. That's why these deep questions are so powerful. Sometimes it's as simple as, instead of asking someone, oh, you're a doctor? What hospital do you work at? It's about asking them, oh, you're a doctor? What made you decide to go to medical school? Right? I'm inviting that person to tell me who they are, to tell me about their experiences, to tell me about their values. That's when we're starting to have a real conversation.
It feels like two things are going on there. Number one, you're really getting to know them.
Yep.
And number two, I bet you any money people leave conversations with you feeling so seen and heard.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant to put it that way, because in every conversation, we have two goals. My goal is to understand how you see the world, and my second goal is to speak in such a way that you can understand how I see the world. Right? And the two things that you just mentioned are exactly that I get a chance to understand you, and that you feel heard by me, which means that you're starting to understand me in return.
So let's say you go on a date, you feel really connected, you feel like you're having this deep conversation, and then you leave the date. And what you end up finding out is they perceive the conversation in the date in a very different way that you perceive the conversation in the date.
Right.
Now you start to replay over and over. What did I say? Did I misunderstand? I thought he said this. And now you become utterly confused over how you've left the conversation feeling like you're connected, and it actually was the opposite. What's going on then? How do you assess that?
Well, I think what you do is you ask questions.
Ask the person questions?
Ask the person questions, yeah. I mean, look, there's this thing called a pre-mortem and a post-mortem that happens in discussions, right? In conversations and in relationships. Like, if we had a date and I thought that date went really well, and you don't want a second date, the best thing I can do is to say, look, I totally respect that. I'm not gonna try and convince you to come on a date with me. I'm trying to become a better version of myself. Can you just tell me what it was? I'm not going to attack you. And I'm also going to show that I'm not going to be defensive. I'm just asking you a question. And what they might say is they might say something like, I asked you 12 questions and you didn't ask me one question. And now you know. Well, the reason why I felt like it was so great is because they asked me question after question. They seemed so interested in me, but I never showed them that I was interested in them. Now I know what to do differently on the next date. Now I know how to connect with the next person.
How much then in those moments, let's say you're in real time and you've already had a bad experience, you're like, I thought it went really well. Clearly it didn't. So now you're on a different date and now you're almost second guessing a little. Talk to me about identifying maybe the synchronization that you kind of talk about in your book.
So when we're in a great conversation, and we know this from recent studies, our bodies and our brains start to change. Without us realizing it in this conversation, our breath patterns have started to match each other. Our heart rates are matching each other. The dilation of the pupils of our eyes is matching.
I noticed both of us do the eye wide.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That happens. That happens like it's automatic. You don't even think about it. Most importantly, the neural activity, what's happening inside my brain and what's happening inside your brain is looking more and more similar. Within neuroscience, this is known as neural entrainment. It's the synchronization, and it feels wonderful. It's the whole point of communication, is for me and you to get synchronized. And when that happens, we feel amazing. And so many ways, when I'm asking you questions, when I'm telling you what I need out of a conversation, what I'm doing is I'm trying to synchronize with you. When you're having an emotional conversation and I choose to join you in that emotional conversation and lean into it, or I say, now that we've talked about how we feel about this, can we talk about some solutions to it? In other words, will you move from an emotional to a practical conversation with me? What I'm doing is I'm inviting you to synchronize with me. And once we're synchronized, it stays that way.
Does synchronization only happen with positivity, or would it happen with negativity as well?
I'm sure that this has happened to you. Sometimes we have good fights, right? They're negative conversations, but I walk away feeling like I got some stuff off my chest. I know that you heard it. You got some stuff off your chest. I definitely heard it. We're synchronized. It doesn't have to be positive. What does have to happen is that we have to be having the same kind of conversation at the same moment.
What do you think is one of the hardest types of conversations that people have in a relationship dynamic?
The hardest kind of conversation in a relationship is oftentimes about how you see me incorrectly in my opinion, right? When you go to Tom or I go to my wife Liz and we say, I'm really, really angry with you. One of the things that we're saying is, I'm angry and you should be taking it seriously and you're not. And the way that we make that conversation better is for the other person to say, I want to understand. I'm not necessarily going to agree with you, but I want to understand why you're so angry. And I validate that you are feeling angry. Like, this is not something I'm going to ignore. This is not something I'm going to sweep under the rug. I want to understand why you feel that way, even if I disagree with you. That's how we take out the venom from that conversation.
It's so simple yet so beautiful. And I think sometimes you notice where you start a conversation, if your communication isn't on point, if you're not learning this stuff, if you're not seeing it from the other person's perspective, you end up not only talking past each other, but it just then escalates and you keep pushing each other's buttons.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you don't even realize that you're talking past each other, right? You think to yourself, if only he heard what I was trying to tell him. But at the same time, the way that we overcome that is we say, how do I prove to him that I'm hearing him? How do I show him? How do I tell him that what I need in this conversation is for you to hear me, not to solve my problems, not to tell me why I shouldn't be worried. I just need you to hear how I'm feeling.
So let's say you do that, but the other person can't hear it for whatever reason. They're emotional, they're in this emotional state, and they keep just ratcheting up.
Yeah. Well, in those cases, I think what you do is you suspend the conversation, right? Let's control together the environment for this conversation, because we're going to be in a different headspace where we can match each other.
How do you then start to communicate boundaries and non-negotiables with somebody?
Like, give me an example.
So let's say you're in a heated argument and your partner turns around and calls you a name. You're being such a bitch right now. That's maybe a boundary for someone where you don't get to talk to me like that.
Yeah.
So how do you set your boundary set your non-negotiable. Hey, you don't get to talk to me like that. If you spoke to me like that again, I'm leaving or whatever. It's so hard for a lot of women to stand up for themselves.
And what I'll say is, if you'll notice what you just said, you don't get to talk to me like that, is me trying to control you.
Oh, yeah.
So a much better thing to say would be to say, when you call me a bitch, let me tell you how it makes me feel. It makes me feel like you don't care about me, like you don't want to actually solve this problem together. It makes me feel terrible about myself. And it makes me feel like you don't love me. So instead of telling you, you don't get to call me that, I'm going to tell you how I feel. And I guarantee you at that moment, the conversation is going to change. And that doesn't mean that your husband is suddenly going to say like, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. But it's going to be a step back. You're going to bring down the temperature. And they're going to say, it is not my goal to make you feel bad. I'm just angry.
I love that if you're in a healthy relationship. My husband's never called me a bitch, by the way, just for the record. And I love what you just said, if you're in a healthy relationship, you can articulate it. A lot of my community, though, are either trying to get out of a toxic relationship, and they're saying that to you to sting you, to cut you metaphorically, emotionally. In that moment, if you turn around and you say that very calm communication, they're either going to bulldoze it, laugh at you, or step on it. So how do you exert, and that's I think why I went to, you can't talk to me like that, because in my head, which please always correct me if I'm wrong, in my head, it feels like I'm taking my power. It feels like I'm putting a stake in the ground and was like, you do not get to cross this line.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good.
And it's okay to put your flag down. It's okay to say, the way I would phrase it would be to say, I don't allow anyone to talk to me like that. I think that language is really inappropriate, and I think we need to stop talking to each other and give ourselves a little bit of time. Some toxic relationships are going to stay toxic, but some toxic relationships can become healthy by learning better communication techniques. It's the lack of communication techniques, the lack of communication skills that's allowing this toxicity to fester. And when we get better at conversations, we allow the toxicity to resolve itself. We create a better relationship. And so it's absolutely fine. You do not have to have any conversation you don't want to have. You are under no obligation. If someone calls you a bitch, you are under no obligation to have a conversation with them, even if it's someone you love. And you can say at that moment, look, that is totally inappropriate. I'm not going to have this conversation. I'm going to go into my room. You go into your room. Let's take some time to think about this. But then when you come back together, if it is a relationship that you want to have, if it is a conversation you want to have, that's when you can say, look, the reason why that word is non-negotiable for me, because it makes me feel terrible. It makes me feel like you don't love me, and it makes me feel bad about myself. And at that moment, what I'm saying to you is, I want to have a conversation with you. And there is nothing that brings you more power than saying, you use that word to make me feel small. I'm going to tell you, the only person that can make me feel small is me. And I'm going to absent myself from you if you use that word.
It feels so powerful to be that calm and articulate. Do you have any other ones that maybe are used where you're like, don't say that, don't say that?
So there is this thing known as kitchen sinking. This is the most toxic habit in a relationship, where a fight about one thing becomes a fight about everything. So we start fighting about where we're gonna go for Thanksgiving, and now I'm talking about like, I hate your mother, and you don't have enough money to go on like a vacation, and
4 years ago you did this one thing.
Exactly,
that
you did this
pissed me
one
off.
thing, and like now, and I'm still bitter about it. That's toxic. So oftentimes, if we're feeling under attack, and I think you used the right word before, you said to be able to say this so calmly. Sometimes we're not calm. Sometimes we're angry and we're upset and we're emotional, and we don't have the time or the presence of mind to take a break and say like, I want to calm down. And in those moments, what's important is for us to be able to say, here's the things that I can control. I can control what this conversation is about. We're just going to talk about Thanksgiving. We're not going to talk about mothers. We're not going to talk about money, right? I just got emotional. I'm not going to feel bad about that. I'm going to control. I'm going to tell myself that's okay. Like that conversation that was 10 minutes ago, now we're in a different conversation. I'm in a different place. I can be whoever I want to be. And I'm going to control what the environment is.
I love that, because a lot of time I do think we beat ourselves up over having a response to something which we then think, oh, I could have done that better, I could have handled it better.
And in the middle of the conversation, it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, look, I just got emotional about this and you reacted badly and I reacted badly to you reacting badly. And I acknowledge I got emotional. Let me tell you why I got so emotional about this.
That is so powerful. I have started to do it a little now in my relationship, where I used to say in the middle of an argument, you always, or you never. And I had done many interviews and I was like, you know what, that's not fair, because that's just generalizing. And when you've been with somebody for 25 years, is always actually true, is never actually true, no. So I started to remember this, and obviously you wrote a book about habits, so you know this, but I'm trying to break my habit, and I recognize that it's a pattern. And so in real time, this was probably a couple of months ago now, I was in the middle of arguing with my husband, I was like, and you never, I'm sorry, no, I shouldn't have said that word.
Yeah.
So literally, as I'm saying the word, I stopped and apologized. I was like, I'm generalizing, that's not fair.
So let me ask you something. When you did that, when you apologized, did you feel powerful?
Oh, it felt so good.
That's the thing.
Yeah, it felt so
We
good.
oftentimes get our most power, not from attacking the other person. We get our most power from being honest with ourselves.
Yes.
Because once I tell you about a vulnerability, once I expose a vulnerability, I own that vulnerability. It doesn't matter. You can't weaponize it against me. You can't do anything worse to me than I want to do to myself, than I allow you to do. It's when I don't voice the vulnerability, when you suspect I have a vulnerability and you can come and you can press that button over and over and over again, and I don't want to admit I have that vulnerability, that's when I'm powerless. But when I say, I'm sorry, I should not have used that word, that is the most powerful thing that I can do. I am owning how I feel, and I am in control of who I am.
It's so true. I never thought about it as I felt powerful. At the time, what I remember feeling was, at least I'm showing my husband that I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get it perfect. Habits take a long time to change. So it's going to take me a while to get to the point where I never say never or always. But if I'm able to catch myself and show him that I'm trying to improve, hopefully he can forgive the missteps. And immediately, he saw me in real time trying to adapt and adjust.
Yeah, it's really powerful. You're showing him that you want to understand how he sees the situation. And you just said the wrong thing and you recognize that.
Yeah. Okay, so apart from, let's say, the nevers and always, are there any other things that you're like, hey, look, in communication, these never land well?
When I try and push you into a corner, when I tell you who you are instead of ask you who you are.
Can you give me an example?
So, as a woman, you must want children as a woman, right? I'm pushing you into a corner. Like, you're 30 other things besides being a woman, and not every woman wants to have children, but I've pushed you into that corner. Anytime I tell you who you are, I'm making a mistake. Instead, what I should do is I should say, I'm just wondering, as someone who's a woman, but also a business person, like how do you think about children? Then I'm inviting you to share with me who you are. That's really, really important. I should never mandate. I should always invite.
What about telling someone how they feel?
Oh, it's terrible, right?
I was like, as I was saying, I was like, that's terrible.
Yeah, that's pushing someone into, you seem really angry about this. You seem really emotional.
Now imagine you're just a little frustrated and somebody says to you, you seem really emotional. It makes this tiny little burst of frustration. Yes, now you've pushed me into emotional.
Exactly. And it's because I'm trying to tell you who you are. I'm trying to tell you that I'm not asking you who you are. I'm telling you who you are. If I was to say, this seems like an important issue for me, tell me how you're feeling. Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling emotional? Now I'm inviting you to tell me rather than mandating who you are.
That's so good. Is there any other little ones?
There's a saying that I really love that goes, when you're feeling furious, get curious. If I'm angry at you, I'm feeling like you're attacking me, instead of attacking back, if I say, I want to take a second, like this is making me feel really, really bad. I want to understand why this is so important to you. What is it about what I did that upsets you so much, and why does it upset you so much? At that moment, I'm taking control of the conversation, but I'm also opening the conversation. Because I'm saying, what you care about, I care about, but help me understand what it is.
So good. Charles, this has been so amazing. Your book is phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Your work is just groundbreaking. Where can people go to follow you, get all your amazing books and everything that you're doing?
So you can buy Supercommunicators or The Power of Habit on Amazon or Barnes
Which the Power Habit, hang on a minute, I just found out, so I have to say this out loud. It has been in the New York Times for 3 years and you sold 10 million copies?
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's been great. It's been great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
That's
it's
amazing.
been so I'd love for people to read my books, and you can find them at Amazon. You can find them at your local bookseller. You can find them wherever you like to buy books. And if they want to find me, I'm just at charlesduhigg.com, Duhigg. And my email address is actually on that site. It's charles@charlesduhigg.com, and I read and respond to every email I get from a reader.
Oh, wow.
So if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd love to have them do so.
That's so cool. Guys, I brought Charles on today because he knows exactly how to communicate. One of the things that us women find difficult is how do we stand up for ourselves? How do we communicate our power when we really want to exude it? And so diving into his world, diving into his book, he gives such tactical takeaways of how you can stand up, how you can have your own back, how you can communicate better so that you can always maintain your power. So go check him out, go check out his book, smash that subscribe button if you're not following. Until next time, be the hero of your own life. Peace. To learn more about how to skillfully handle manipulative conversations without losing your cool, watch my amazing interview right here with Jefferson Fisher.
They will provoke you into an emotional response because they delight in your anger as much as they delight